Recording.
All right. Greetings. Welcome to Ill Repute, the podcast about women and women first. I'm Sovereign Sire. I am a writer, a comedian, drag queen guidance counselor.
And I'm Ella Darling, a former librarian, a VR pioneer, and according to the American Library Association, a radical militant librarian. I'm just librarian here, there, everywhere.
Yes.
Now, we here at Ill Repute support women's rights, but more importantly,
we support women's wrongs. So Ella, which women's wrongs are we righting today?
the American woman and the wrongs that would be done to her under Project 2025.
Well, to be fair, she deserves it. She's a bad woman. She is a fallen woman. She is an independent woman. She is a childless cat lady.
Ugh.
She is a feminazi.
She's an unwed mother at the same time.
She's ungovernable, and we're tired of her.
Mm-hmm.
Get her out.
She needs to be back home, raising her kids in her nuclear family where she belongs.
She needs to be back in her pod. Yeah, she needs to be back in her pod, just in stirrups, just getting constantly inseminated and then forced to push babies out like a Pez dispenser. Like, why do they even need their own homes? Let's just put them all in like one tenement, and anyone that comes by can just like her, and then she can't do anything about it. I'm describing an incel heaven right now.
Yeah.
You just walk into the tenement, everyone's strapped up to the table, and you pick which one you want. You dump your load in her, and she is forced to carry that child and then put right back on the assembly line. Right back
because
on.
She shouldn't be hoarding her vaginal resources.
Exactly. We need more. Did you see the Trump rally? And so many of your beautiful babies. And I was like, the only thing he's missing is the word white in front of it.
It was implied.
Yeah, it was implied. Yeah, it was canon. The white was canon. So, yeah.
Well, he's just really fascinated with genetics.
Because did you hear? We have bad genes here in America. We have a lot of bad genes here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Woo.
All right. So this is where I would ask you if you're familiar with Project 2025, but I know that you are. And I think everybody is on some level, at least on a tangential level. But there's a lot of discourse around it that either really gets it right or misses the mark in a few ways. And so we're going to discuss it.
Okay. Sounds good.
I think it's very timely since we're coming up into election season.
I voted today.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I voted today. Was very happy to fill in the spot for Kamala Harris. Felt very, very nice to do that. But yeah, I don't know how it is in other states, but if you're in California, you got your mail-in ballot, and baby, you can drop that off up to 21 days before the election. And so I filled mine out, and then I forgot to bring it over here because there is a drop box right by Joshy's place. So, but yeah, filled it out today, and we'll drop it off today or tomorrow. But if you're in California, like, you can vote now. You don't have to wait. You don't have to stand in line. And if you register in California, just Google voter registration California. You can do it online. It takes 2 seconds. You put in your driver's license number, the last 4 digits of your social, your address. They will send you the thing. You are automatically sent a mail-in ballot if you register in California. It's like automatic. Cool. And you get it. Like, as of like a couple days ago, you could already start putting it in your Dropbox. They're all over town. And when you get your mail-in ballot, it gives you a list of 10 of the nearest drop boxes. So you don't even have to go to a polling place to drop it off. They're these secured, basically, mailboxes that are just for voting ballots. So if you're in California and you haven't gotten your ballot yet, go make sure you're registered. They will get that squared away for you. And yeah, you can start voting right now. And we have some crazy on the ballot. One is that it would make it illegal for them to be doing slavery in the prison system in California.
Wow.
They phrase it as would no longer be able to, how did they put it? Enforced servitude. That the prison system would no longer be allowed to enforce servitude on inmates, which means they can't be forced to do labor. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of companies use prison labor to make their products. Maytag is one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like a lot of like big time. So like your washing machines, things like that. A lot of people don't realize that those are built by inmates that are being paid like cents a week,
literally.
pennies a week. Yeah. So that was on the ballot. I got to vote. Yeah, we are getting rid of that. And then another one was if you've been convicted of more than one drug offense, you can be charged with a felony. No. We are not doing that. No. So anyway, if you're in California, read through your ballot. There's some pretty big measures on there that if you want reform, you want the penal system to be better, there's some stuff on the ballot that you can make your voice heard. So, and remember that elections are more than just about president.
Yes.
You know?
And they happen several times a year. All right. So vote for Kamala because we don't want to face what the Heritage Foundation has in store for America if former President Trump is reelected.
So, Ella, could you tell us what is the Heritage Foundation and what is Project 2025?
So, the Project 2025 Mandate for Leadership is a 922-page document written by a far-right conservative think tank called the Heritage Foundation. It was established in 1973, and they were very influential in developing and advancing the Reagan Doctrine and Reaganomics. So this is not their first mandate for leadership. They had one under Reagan, and a lot of it got pushed through, and that's why our economy is terrible and in shambles. And I'll never own a house, but I will house a lot of existential ennui. Instead.
For those that aren't familiar, Reaganomics is also called trickle-down economics, and it's an economic theory that has never worked. It has never worked. We've done it, and it doesn't work. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, the theory is we tax the rich way less, so they have like all this capital, and that because they're saving all this money on like not paying taxes and getting all of these like credits and breaks from government, that extra profit will trickle down. That means that they'll give out more raises, they'll pay higher salaries, they'll do all this stuff. And then that in turn will stimulate the economy because then you'll have this middle class that has like more money and they're spending that money, which in theory, okay, we did it and that does not work.
It has never trickled down.
It never trickles down. It is hoarded. The wealth is hoarded, which is why we're where we're at now. So that was like the Reagan Doctrine. That was Reaganomics, like in a nutshell. And yeah, it didn't work.
Yes. So despite Trump disavowing himself from this initiative, even in the one and probably only presidential debate that we'll see this year, he simultaneously claimed he had nothing to do with it and that he hasn't read it, which it's 922 pages. I don't think he would read 922 words in a row. But in any case, the board and the contributors to Project 2025 consist of a lot of his previous cabinet members, his advisors, and officials that he appointed. And his name is mentioned over 300 times in this mandate. So
Heritage's defense is generally that it's just a guide, but people use it. So,
well, their previous just a guide destroyed our economy and the middle class.
So the plan has 4 key pillars outlined at the beginning of the document. There's the policy agenda as outlined in the mandate to align the government with conservative values. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
A personnel database to move forward their plan to fill the positions in government with people with conservative ideals. Sounds so fun. The, quote, Presidential Administration Academy to further indoctrinate said personnel. And most notably, the first 180-day playbook, which outlines the formation of agency teams and drafting transition plans to move out upon the president's utterance of, quote, "so help me God," unquote, which is how you end when you
take the oath.
Yeah. I, Kamala Desi Harris. Anyway.
So we're going to be quoting a lot directly from the mandate because there's a lot of summaries about this stuff. And I don't want to stray too far from the actual word of what they said, because what they say is damning enough without me having to extrapolate and theorize too much.
Yeah,
So.
no, that's my same criticism of the stuff is like, just put like what it actually says, because it's so. So the main thing is that the plans put forth, they span like every aspect of American life and would be detrimental for anyone who isn't male, wealthy, healthy, and white. The Washington Post described the plan as calling for, quote unquote, infusing Christian nationalism into every facet of government policy. And Christian nationalism is 100% interchangeable with white nationalism.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
It's a 1-to-1.
It's
the same.
Yeah, it's a flat circle.
Yes. The future of America under this plan looks bleak. Environmental protections would be largely eliminated. Healthcare would be gutted. Reproductive rights would be destroyed pretty much. Support infrastructure for poor single parents and children and families would be redesigned to primarily assist straight married families. Worker rights and protections would be put right out the door. And the checks and balances system that maintains the balance of power in our government would be gone. So we're going to start there.
Yeah, let's look at checks and balances. So Project 2025 proposes a series of changes that could weaken key governmental checks and balances, centralizing more power into the executive branch and undermining the independence of other institutions. That's horrible. One of the core goals of the document is stacking the deck with conservative appointees, filling government roles with people who align ideologically. They've even got training programs ready to churn out a steady stream of like-minded individuals. On a base level, they would politicize traditionally nonpartisan agencies, filling every nook and cranny with their agenda. Like down to like that one lady that wouldn't do gay marriages. Remember that one? She had like the long hair.
Yeah.
Kim something.
Yeah.
Where like she just refused to sign a gay marriage certificate. Like imagine if like every step of the way with government, everything, you had some bitch like that.
Well, that is really consistent throughout the whole document. They want to make it so that Christian values are, it's kind of the central theme is good Christian values, but you can't possibly discriminate against people if you're just following your own religious code. And whether that's healthcare providers or, I mean, literally anyone, they would rather protect somebody's decision not to do their civil service job than, oh my gosh, actually have anti-discrimination policies in place for anyone. At its core, this proposal would effectively politicize government agencies, infusing them with the right-wing agenda. Notably, it seeks to limit the oversight capabilities of independent regulatory bodies. It would significantly reduce the role of agencies like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. This would not only curb the influence of these agencies, but it would also weaken the judiciary's capacity to review executive actions, thus eroding a key mechanism of governmental checks and balances, which is basically that our government consists of 3 primary bodies, and each of them have different distributed amounts of power so that no single entity has too much power. It's supposed to keep things running roughly smoothly. Do you want to expand on that a little bit? I don't know if everybody knows what checks and balances is.
So checks and balances, there are 3 wings of government. There's the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. So executive branch can like veto things. The presidency can like veto things, can create bills, different stuff. The legislative branch is generally what we think of as like Congress, House of Representatives, and Senate, the ability to make laws, pass things into laws, like propose acts, measures, bills, et cetera. And then the judiciary branch is, we tend to think of it as the Supreme Court, but it's like the court system where basically the Supreme Court is there to make sure that laws that are passed, executive orders that are put through align with the Constitution, or have constitutional merit, are not undermining Constitution and the rights of citizens like therein. So like Roe v. Wade wasn't about abortion per se, it was about privacy rights. And the initial ruling was that people have a part of like life, liberty, pursuit of happiness is like a certain innate right to privacy. It's nobody's business, basically. Like what, like medical decisions, things like that, those fall under like our right to privacy. So,
Right.
but they're all there to make sure that no one thing has enough power to just become a dictatorship, essentially. In theory, that's why Supreme Court justices have a lifelong appointment, is so that they are not politicized, that no matter what they decide, they can't lose their job. That was the idea, was because the Supreme Court is kind of like the final stop on the way to a law. And that has been corrupted.
Well, that's one of the key flaws in America, it seems, in the eyes of the Heritage Foundation. Avoiding a dictatorship, it's just like that's where I think they believe that things went wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So furthermore, the judiciary itself is a target of reform within the framework of Project 2025. By advocating for the appointment of judges who share a conservative outlook, the initiative seeks to align the judicial branch more closely with the executive's objectives, potentially undermining the judiciary's role as the independent check on executive overreach. Such an alignment could have far-reaching implications for the separation of powers, particularly in cases where judicial review is necessary to constrain the executive branch. For instance, deciding if the executive branch has immunity for crimes committed while in office. That would be something.
A significant emphasis is placed on the expanded use of executive orders to bypass the legislative processes, thereby enabling the executive to implement policy changes unilaterally. In areas like foreign policy and military intervention, this shift could dramatically reduce Congress's oversight role, particularly in matters that are traditionally reserved for legislative approval, like declarations of war or the ratification of international treaties.
Yeah. So that would be like, we're just not going to give Ukraine aid anymore. Or we're going to arm Israel to the teeth and let it just obliterate Palestine. Problem solved.
Yes.
Too bad. Like that's what that would enable, basically. And it would enable him to do some kind of treaty within Russia, like without any which is kind
without
of
oversight.
Yeah, which is what we're all afraid of, because it's very obvious like who he fetishizes, which is Putin, and then the guy from, was it like Hungary, Viktor Orban?
Yeah.
Like his whole thing is I love strongmen. Like I want to be one. Like I'm going to give them secret COVID tests that are hard to get while people are dying by the hundreds here, so that Vladimir Putin can have his own personal COVID test personally from Donald Trump.
Probably signed.
Yeah, like the Jewish prayer book at the memorial. Okay. The proposal also includes provisions to cut out or reallocate funding for various social programs and international aid, thereby consolidating budgetary control within the executive branch. By limiting Congress's power of the purse, a key legislative check on executive power would be significantly weakened, granting the president greater autonomy in shaping fiscal policy. So
Project 2025. Oh, go ahead.
No, like it's just whatever social program. Yeah, that's gone. Medicare.
Oh, yeah. And
Medicaid. Social Security.
Head Start.
Head Start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye. Yeah.
We'll get there. But it essentially seeks to diminish the influence of independent regulatory agencies by transferring decision-making authority to politically appointed leaders. This restructure would reduce the level of independent oversight over government operations, and it could pave the way for the dismantling of substantial portions of the administrative state.
For example, they want to completely eliminate Head Start and the Department of Education, which they claim injects racist, anti-American, ahistorical propaganda into America's classrooms. This has been a conservative talking point for decades. While turning the administration of schools and creation of curricula to the states may hold water, It's hard to entertain good faith arguments in favor of this move given the rest of their agenda. And if you remember from like the last episode, and I was talking about the purpose of public education in a democracy and why charter schools and anything that's designed to privatize education is like a dog whistle. It's, this is why.
There's a lot of that in this.
Yeah.
They really, really hate public schools. The organization outlines several proposed changes regarding critical civil rights laws in the United States, like Title IX, which prohibits sex-based discrimination in educational programs and activities receiving federal funding. They also want to eliminate all DEI initiatives from educational and governmental institutions. And that isn't just training protocols, that is anything that acknowledges discrimination on any level, unless you're being discriminated against because you're a white Christian.
In the text, mass censorship is couched in ideas like, this one block quote, restoring the family as the centerpiece of American life to protect children by removing content that is inappropriate by a reasonable person from schools and libraries and only allow material that reflects conservative values. The next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. This starts with deleting the terms sexual orientation and gender identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, gender, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency, regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists.
It's hypocrisy. In the same sentence, they want to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights to avoid depriving them of First Amendment rights. It makes no goddamn sense. In the Heritage Foundation's vision of the future, they state in their own words that, and this is another quote from the document, pornography should be outlawed. The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. Educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered sex offenders. And telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate its spread should be shuttered, which means if you make porn, you go to jail. If you are an internet service provider and someone accesses porn through the internet that you provide, the company would be shut down. And this, I forgot to put it into the script, but this is really fascinating because one of the really big proponents of Project 2025 is somebody who, his name is Corey DeAngelis, but you may know him as the gay porn star Seth Rose. Straight up did gay porn and now is one of the big people who are activists against porn and also public schools. And I get to a degree being in the porn industry, leaving and then hating the porn industry, but this is like next level kind of.
Well, I mean, it's I'm very phobic of porn now that I've been retired for 4 years, but I'm not phobic of my coworkers.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want my coworkers or anyone that is choosing to do sex work to go to jail. No. I think porn needs a lot of reform. I have very ambivalent feelings about it, but my feelings about my colleagues are crystal clear, which they're exercising their freedoms. They have a choice to do that, and they in no way should go to jail for doing the most natural thing on the planet, which is
Yes.
What?
And regardless of how you feel about, as you put it, Salvi, in one of my favorite TikToks, gentlemen's special interest films, they also broaden the definition of pornography to include things like transgender ideology, which means that any material that is inclusive of LGBT existence would be subject to that same censorship and
so if you're trans, you become a registered sex offender, basically.
The document also expresses a strong opposition to critical race theory. They advocate for creating a parental bill of rights, which would financially empower parents to sue schools for teaching or talking about critical race theory, which they claim disrupts societal values by emphasizing color consciousness instead of a, quote, colorblind society.
Yeah, we don't want to see
color.
We don't want to see Black people. We don't even see Black people. Whenever someone says they're colorblind, what they're saying is like, I don't see anyone that isn't white. So And I don't want to. It's a really offensive thing to say. I'm colorblind. Deja Saad explains it well in her video, What is Project 2025? What you should probably know about it.
The policy agenda calls for changes to ensure that schools comply with the colorblind ideal. It's asking that the next administration create a parent's bill of rights that schools have to abide by. And in this bill of rights includes the right to support and provide relief to parents who sue educational institutions for teaching or talking about critical race theory, or teaching American history in any capacity that isn't celebratory of its total awesomeness. I'm not kidding. They're arguing that teaching America's full history is equivalent to defending the false idea that America is systemically not as nice to some people as it is to other people. And to do so, to even teach that, is a violation of the parents' rights, and the parent should be allowed to sue with support of the federal government because of that. No problem with parents having rights, but for me, how exactly does creating multiple realities through historical fiction create alignment, remove division, and better our country overall? I'm still waiting on that answer too, young Padawan. I'm still waiting on that answer too.
She's amazing, or they're amazing. They have several videos. Check them out on YouTube. They're phenomenal.
Yeah, it'll be linked in the show notes too.
Meanwhile, they would eliminate access to library materials that may be deemed inappropriate or offensive, including, like we said, any books that discuss LGBTQ themes or discussions around race and racism. The proposal insists that libraries should face penalties for having materials that they deem inappropriate, and that schools that don't comply would lose funding.
So I'm guessing they would take the books out of the library, and then bookstores couldn't sell them anymore. So then they'd have all these books that they'd have to get rid of. I feel like, what would you do? Burn them?
They're already doing that.
Yeah. So book burning.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That has always gone well. And it's always the good guys that do it. The plan also advocates for school choice initiatives, particularly through diverting public education funding towards vouchers for private and charter schools. This redirection of funds would, in effect, channel significant financial resources to religious organizations that often operate these institutions. By prioritizing private and religious education, the initiative aims to shift the educational landscape, potentially weakening the financial stability of public schools.
Which is what they want. They are just full chest. They do not like the public school system. Hate it.
But they don't want to raise their own children. Just raise your own kids then.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of these congressmen spending 8 hours a day homeschooling their kids.
So they're also aggressively opposed to providing free meals for children in schools, and they want to gut federal assistance programs for low-income families. Now, they don't directly come out and say that they want to ban the school lunch program or SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, what we used to refer to as food stamps. But they do put forth in very convoluted language and weirdly cherry-picked math notes about state unemployment rates and county unemployment rates and how all of this should work in conjunction to control who is allowed to access the program. Basically, instead of just banning it outright, they do a lot of weird math and pull a lot of to make it seem like they're being reasonable. Because if they're too aggressive on it, then it's just they're saying the quiet part way out loud. So instead, they're just saying the quiet part kind of out loud.
They don't want them making another me. I grew up on food stamps. I grew up on welfare. I went to state schools. Everything was paid for by federal grants, funding, scholarships. They don't want someone like me coming out of that because I came out knowing what was up and able to articulate it.
Yep.
On a podcast. Yeah. They don't want people like me to exist.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the initiative would also re-implement work requirements to receive assistance, which recent studies have shown do not actually increase employment, but do cause many people to lose access to food assistance. Because most people that are unemployed very much want to be employed. They're not employed because they can't find a job.
Unemployed.
It's people want to be employed. Most people that are unemployed want very much to have employment and don't want to rely on government assistance. That's embarrassing. This whole myth of the welfare queen, as someone that came from it, that's embarrassing. When people come over to your house and you have the government cheese and the government applesauce, that shit is so embarrassing. Like,
Mhm.
no one wants that. No one wants that. No one is like clicking their heels because they need government assistance. Like, it's just not happening.
Yeah.
I hate it here. I hate it here.
And really, so when I was reading about this, this was news to me that, I mean, it's not surprising, but I didn't know that there's actual, like, there are recent studies that straight up indicate that increasing the work requirements to receive assistance does not increase employment at all. It just makes it so fewer people are eating and
Yeah.
able to like afford to exist.
So during the Clinton administration, this program was called Welfare to Work, and they got rid of it because it didn't work. There was a documentary, and they were like following a woman where he had implemented this new policy, Welfare to Work, which meant that in order to maintain your welfare benefits, like you had to like go get work or go do whatever. And this woman had like 3 or 4 kids, was a single mom, and would get up at like 4 a.m. to like ride the bus to another town because that was the only place that was hiring, to like work this job to maintain these like minuscule benefits. And it was just so abhorrent to people that very shortly after the documentary came out, like that policy, like it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It just tortures people. It's just a way to torture poor people, which is kind of exactly what they want.
It is. And we're going to touch on this later, but I'm just going to allude to it. They also, while expecting people to jump through hoops to meet these minimum work requirements, they also want to gut any funding and support for daycare because they think that children should be cared for in the home instead. So I'm not sure how, if I'm a single mother, I would be expected to simultaneously be at home caring for my kid because I can't afford daycare and going out to work these jobs. But the whole point is that they
well,
don't
it's your
want
punishment
you
for
to
being a single
exist.
mom because you wouldn't let your husband beat the out of you like a good wife. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, did you know that the best way to solve poverty is to focus on marriage and avoiding premarital sex? Yeah, neither did I, because it's not.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I was like, you mean implementing social welfare programs, giving everyone housing and universal basic income and free school? Because that,
well, under Project, yeah, that would actually help. That's
that
what we
does
fucking
work.
need. Yeah. Well, under Project 2025, temporary assistance for needy families, or TANF, would be wildly reconfigured. This is a quote. TANF priorities are not implemented in an equally weighted way. Marriage, healthy family formation, and delaying sex to prevent pregnancy are virtually ignored in terms of priorities, yet these goals can reverse the cycle of poverty in meaningful ways. CMS should require explicit measurements of these goals, unquote. Now, I'm not sure what kind of information they think they are going to put out that is going to keep people from being raped and then having a child because they have no access to abortion under the mandate for leadership that this organization is putting out. But basically, their idea is to limit access to federal support and assistance programs to people who are married and who have children that came from that union and who did not have sex or get pregnant outside of wedlock and then subsequently refused to marry.
I mean, my thing is, if marriage is so great, then why are so many conservatives gay? I mean, straight up, they're gay or they're pedophiles. Like, if you look at the list of the number of conservative men that are busted for sexually assaulting children,
well,
and
the reason
way
it's so great to them is because it enslaves a woman while they go and have the like whatever sex that they want, as long as they have a woman pinned down in their home, basically being a bang maid or just a maid.
A slave.
Yeah, a slave. Now, let's revisit what they said. They wanted to implement explicit measurement of attaining the goals they laid out. How do you imagine they plan to measure the goals regarding when and with whom people have sex?
Well, they're going to monitor women's reproductive cycles.
That is, so I did some research on that. There's no mention of that. There's no mention of like a period passport or anything like that.
They say
in the
tracking
document.
Fertility.
But yeah,
keeping a record of fertility.
That is what they propose as their preferred contraception method instead of actual contraception. But we'll get there. We'll get there in just a few minutes.
Yeah. So the project would also eviscerate women's long-held rights to sex equality in the workplace. It calls for the next president to rescind executive orders signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson in the mid-1960s that prohibited federal contractors from discriminating on the basis of race and sex. And it would weaken Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits sex discrimination in employment. It's like, we want discrimination. That is what we want. Like, that is crazy.
So there's 3 articles written by Carrie N. Baker from Ms. Magazine that I really, really enjoyed. And I'm going to quote from one of them. She summarized the plans to eliminate the Title VII coverage in the workplace as follows. First, it would narrow the meaning of the word sex in Title VII to mean, quote, biological binary meaning of sex, unquote, allowing employment decisions based on gender stereotypes. In 1989, the Supreme Court ruled that an accounting firm violated Title VII when it denied a woman partnership based on partner's comments that she needed a course in charm school and should walk more femininely, talk more femininely, dress more femininely, wear makeup, have her hair styled, and wear jewelry. The plan calls for the next president to eliminate Title VII coverage of disparate impact discrimination, where an employer practice appears to be sex neutral but falls more harshly on women than men and cannot be justified by business necessity. That would mean, for example, that employers could disproportionately screen out female job candidates by using unnecessary strength, aerobic capacity, and endurance tests or height requirements that are unrelated to the job. And that, again, is from Ms. Magazine.
Oh my God. By weakening the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, victims of workplace discrimination would have to file expensive and time-consuming lawsuits to defend their Title VII and Title IX rights. It lays out plans to issue an executive order exempting religious employers from laws prohibiting sex discrimination, allowing them to discriminate against employees who have abortions or are parents.
Overtime pay would also look a lot different. So once again, they're not suggesting that we eliminate it. They're just moving and shaking the numbers in such a way that if you're a middle class or lower income citizen of America and you're reading this and you're conservative, it doesn't sound at face value like you're going to be losing a bunch of rights, but you would be. So they put forth adjustments to federal overtime rules that would significantly alter how overtime pay is calculated. One of the key recommendations is to allow employers and employees to choose a longer pay period, specifically 2 to 4 weeks calculation for overtime instead of the traditional 1-week standard. So this change would mean that overtime pay could be eliminated in certain scenarios, since workers might not receive overtime pay even if they work more than 40 hours in a single week, provided that their hours balance out over the longer period. So if I have to work 60 hours in a week, and then next week I am only working 15 hours, as long as it averages out to 40 hours a week, I can go myself if I think I'm going to get paid extra for working such an egregiously long work week.
Yeah, it's called overtime for a reason.
Yeah.
In 2024, the Biden administration issued a policy that will make over 4 million workers newly eligible to qualify for overtime pay. The U.S. Department of Labor did this by raising the overtime threshold, which is the salary ceiling under which salaried workers still qualified automatically for overtime pay if they work more than 40 hours in a week, even though those workers are not paid hourly. Raising the overtime threshold increases the number of workers with guaranteed overtime protections. Currently, the threshold protects non-hourly workers who make up to $43,000 annually, and it's set to rise again in 2025 to apply to people making up to $58,000. Project 2025 proposes lowering the threshold and taking away overtime eligibility for millions of workers. And this has to do when you hear those stories about the lady at Wells Fargo that dies at her desk and no one notices. That's what we're talking about, is that people that get a salary because the bosses know that the job is going to demand that they work more than 40 hours a week. Anyway.
And they explain it away with just a lot of kind of hand waving. This is probably fine anyway, essentially. It's weird how they just gloss over shit. But they also suggest that employers should pay overtime for hours worked on the Sabbath, so that you are getting overtime if you work on Sunday, which is, of course, how they define the Sabbath in accordance with their Christo-fascist leanings, this is just one of the many nods towards accommodating their own religious observances in this document. The one thing that I guess kind of is okay for workers is only because it supports their Christian values and their Christian governance. And once again, it would effectively funnel money into churches. They also want to give religious organizations broad exemption from anti-discrimination laws.
The initiative calls for deregulation of labor standards, a reflection of a broader political philosophy that prioritizes free market principles over regulatory oversight. This perspective argues that less regulation can spur economic growth, but it would weaken workplace safety standards enforced by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. This deregulation may expose workers and children to unsafe conditions without adequate protections or recourse, because workers have too many protections.
So you mentioned that it would expose workers and children to unsafe conditions because they also want to roll back child labor regulations to make it easier for minors to work inherently dangerous jobs. And that's not editorializing on my part. This is a quote verbatim from Project 2025 Mandate for Leadership. Quote, hazard order regulations. Some young adults show an interest in inherently dangerous jobs. Current rules forbid many young people, even if their family is running the business, from working in such jobs. This results in worker shortages in dangerous fields and often discourages otherwise interested young workers from trying to work the more dangerous job. With parental consent and proper training, certain young adults should be allowed to learn and work in more dangerous occupations. This would give a green light to training programs and build skills in teenagers who may want to work in these fields. The Department of Labor should amend its hazard order regulations to permit teenage workers access to work in regulated jobs with proper training and parental consent.
But not
They
your
want
kids.
Minors to be minors.
But not your kids.
Yeah.
Not their kids. Poor
Just
kids.
certain.
Just poor kids. So who's impacted
Exactly.
by this? Poor people. Children from families with the greatest economic necessity would be the most likely to take on dangerous jobs. This lack of protections could lead to increased risks of exploitation and unsafe working conditions, which are especially concerning for younger workers who may be less aware of their rights. My great-grandfather was 21 years old and worked as a brakeman on a train back in the day when it was a very dangerous job. And he died and left my great-grandmother a widow with a young infant. And that impacted 3 generations of families. So,
wow. Yeah. Well, they also want to essentially dismantle unions, but that is something we'll probably get into in next week's episode. But they want young teenagers, young children, to be working these jobs. They also want to make it harder for labor forces to advocate for themselves and collective bargaining. And
yes.
So we're going to shift to healthcare now.
Okay.
So Medicare's new ability to negotiate lower prescription drug prices for seniors, including a cap on insulin and caps on how much out-of-pocket spending people can be subject to, would be really been transformed for millions of seniors and just anyone on Medicare in the United States. According to the Center for American Progress, these negotiations are targeting some of the most expensive drugs frequently used by seniors, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars in drug costs each year. They're also critical for advancing health equity, given that many of the prescriptions targeted by the negotiations treat conditions disparately experienced by people who have historically experienced marginalization because of their race or gender. While Project 2025's plan is to specifically instruct Congress to repeal this part of the IRA, they would probably also advise the Department of Justice to stop defending Medicare's ability to negotiate these drug prices in courts where the program faces numerous challenges. They really want to gut Medicare and Medicaid in a lot of different just a myriad of ways.
Several of their proposals would push people toward private Medicare alternatives, which are not real alternatives at all, with reports showing that Medicare Advantage plans threaten rural hospitals and patients and misled people into signing up for them. While Project 2025 may pitch these Medicare reforms as encouraging consumer choice, in reality, they will leave seniors worse off across the country, putting the health of many of the 33 million people enrolled in traditional Medicare at risk. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. And they're not people who are particularly empowered to advocate for themselves.
Okay, let's get to the part that's going to really piss me off.
All right. Reproductive health care. So under their plan, abortion coverage under any insurance or any kind of like medical coverage would be eliminated. Any entity that provides abortions or offers any resources to abortion providers would be defunded and banned from accepting Medicaid, specifically Planned Parenthood, who they note by name, which is the largest provider of sex education in the country and one of the largest providers of all kinds of just general health for women, especially impoverished people.
Yeah. In their own words, they want, quote, a bare minimum policy of limiting abortion pills to the pre-2016 policy of 49 days gestation, returning to the pre-2021 in-person dispensing requirement, and returning to requiring prescribers to report all serious adverse events, not just deaths, to the drug sponsor, who would increase women's health and safety.
Let's dig into that a little bit because they want to really increase reporting and monitoring of anything adjacent to abortions, which means they want to know who, when, and where is getting abortions. They specifically want that information. What they sort of hedge at is that they're trying to defend Black women from being targeted by being encouraged to have abortions. They don't give a fiddler's about that. They just want to know exactly which women have the audacity to take control over their own reproductive health. And I also want to touch on 49 days gestation. 49 days. That means
that's 7 times 7. It's 49. But like realistically, we're looking at like just over a month pregnant.
Yeah. So this is something that I think is really, really important that a lot of people don't understand. I didn't understand this until, I don't know, fairly recently. 7 weeks pregnant doesn't mean I had sex and then in 7 weeks, then I have 7 weeks to get an abortion. Even in that situation, that's way not enough time. 7 weeks pregnant means that the first 2 to 3 weeks of pregnancy, you could be a virgin because it starts on the day of your last menstrual period. So for the first couple of weeks before you even have sex and are likely to become pregnant, you have not a penis in sight. So 7 weeks pregnant means that you actually only had sex maybe 4 to 5 weeks ago, which means it's just enough time to start wondering if your period is late or not and think I should really keep an eye on this.
This is the same group of people. This is the same group of people that think that you can't get pregnant if you're raped because if you're raped, your body can just shut it down. These people are so full of magical. They believe in the Bible. And I will just go back to my refrain, God isn't real, but people are. And so we need to be dealing with people and the problems people have. God can sort it out later. If God has an issue with Ella's abortion, they can sort that out later if he's real. I can't wait for that imaginary conversation where God would be really focused on whether or not you had an abortion. I'm sure that would be top of mind for God.
God would probably have a bigger problem with a joke I made to the doctor when I got my abortion, which was that he told me that he legally has to tell me that I'm pregnant with twins and do I still want to do this? And I told him I want to do it twice as much now. And that motherfucker couldn't even crack a smile for me.
Oh, God.
That happened.
My God.
So they aim to revoke FDA approval of drugs like mifepristone and misoprostol, which are used in the majority of abortions in the US. That's what I used for my abortion when I had one. Full disclosure, I did that. I am not ashamed. It was one of the best choices I could have made for myself in my life. And they want to weaponize the long dormant Comstock Act to criminalize the distribution of abortion drugs through the mail. Despite the Department of Justice, the courts, and Congress already making clear that the Comstock Act does not apply to legal abortion care, Project 2025 plans to weaponize the Department of Justice to resurrect this act to ban nationwide medication abortion access. Now, the Comstock Act is a really bad law that was, I had to learn about it in library school. I think it was sort of focused on banning distribution of things like pornography through the mail, which ended up banning, there were some court cases about things like Pulp Fiction, not the film, but like the the comics and stuff. So that's what they're pulling on to push that one through.
Yeah. So post-Dobbs, the FDA has played an important role by allowing the distribution of mifepristone by mail and at certain pharmacies. This has allowed increased access to care, given that not everyone has the privilege of convenient in-person doctor access. If these plans were implemented, it would become harder for everyone to access abortion care, particularly low-income pregnant people and those in rural communities.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Did you see?
Did
you see Kamala's? She did an interview on the Call Her Daddy podcast.
Oh yeah, I watched it.
It was really good. But she talks about how, like, okay, so if you're in a state where you can't get an abortion, she notes that the majority of people who seek abortions are already mothers or parents. So you have to buy a plane ticket, fly to a state where you can get it done, get a hotel room, hopefully have care. You're probably by yourself because your support system is looking after the children that you have that you can't be there for because you had to go to a different state. And that's assuming you can afford to do any of that and get time off and not lose your job and all of, like, it's so unreasonable.
Yeah, they're just gonna have to kill the baby when it's born and put it in the toilet or the dumpster. And I hate to be crass, but like that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people being forced to give birth to children they don't want that then become murderers because they will get rid of it. That is what people do. Again, God is not real. People are. If people don't have choices, they will still make them. They will just make even more horrible choices. Like that because that's what we're talking about. Like, because if you tell people like you have to have this baby, people will kill their baby. They will. It's like, and that's the thing about having men determine these laws is they have no idea what it feels like to be pregnant, especially if you don't want that baby.
Especially if you were raped.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's like, this is going to lead to so much child abuse because even if they don't kill the baby, that parent is going to hate that kid. Like the amount of like generational trauma that is going to be just like passed down the line. And I hate to be crass, but I've been a woman long enough and I've heard the stories and I just like, there's what you want to happen and then there's accepting reality.
Well, then they go on to, as we discussed, they then would not allow that single parent to access support and funds and programs to help them raise that child. Yeah. So we'll get to adoption in a minute, but it would also eliminate HIPAA protections for patients seeking abortions and make it easier for extremists to access personal information about patients' reproductive care. Following the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, the Biden administration issued guidance under HIPAA to clarify that, with some exceptions, healthcare providers and health plans are not required and often not allowed to disclose patients' private information, including to law enforcement. The administration later implemented a rule to protect the medical records of patients who travel across state lines to obtain a legal abortion from criminal investigations. And they want to overturn that and remove that privacy, that medical privacy.
Yeah. So while there's already at least one documented case of a Texas man suing his ex-girlfriend for traveling out of state to seek an abortion, Project 2025 argues that the Biden administration's privacy guidance is merely fear-mongering, claiming that a future administration would likely rescind it. And good looking out, Colorado. She went to Colorado. She moved to Colorado. And he's been trying to get like her medical records, all this stuff. And like Colorado was like, fuck you. Like, shout out to Colorado Supreme Court's going like, you can go for yourself. And basically said like, listen here, Texas, we ain't in Texas. So you can keep it. Like, like Colorado's just like, you don't have jurisdiction here, bitch. Like you ain't getting shit.
Colorado has already been that bitch who's like, yeah, people leave your state to come to our state to do things that are illegal in your state. Maybe you should just legalize weed already. And also, why are you being so weird about abortions?
Yeah.
Project 2025 would also eliminate coverage for contraception and Plan B, as well as condoms, which I found interesting because they call condoms an exclusively male contraceptive method. That's their reasoning for why healthcare providers shouldn't be allowed to give people condoms, women condoms. Instead, they go really hard on advocating for fertility awareness-based methods, it's like the rhythm method, and it's really ineffective. Like it's super ineffective. It's basically tracking your period and different other like sort of body signs to see when you're fertile so that you can avoid having sex or being raped, I suppose, on those days. But so what happens to the children who are born from failed fertility awareness methods when abortion is eliminated? Well, they should obviously be raised by straight married people, of course. On adoption reform, their way forward to place more children in homes is to, and this is a quote, repeal the unnecessary 2016 regulation that imposes non-statutory sexual orientation and gender identity non-discrimination conditions on agency grants and return to the policy of maximizing the options for placing vulnerable children in their forever homes.
Like a dog.
They use
like a dog.
Like a dog.
Like a dog. Oh,
forever homes.
Because you little crotch goblin, all you're going to do your entire life is work in the sewer eating our... But we need a lot of you because we eat a lot and we have a lot of...
Yeah, and we need you out there. We can't wait 18 years. We need you there when you're like 14.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fine. You'll be fine. Your mom said you could.
Yeah.
So what all of that means is they want
no queers, no queers, no queers, no trans, no one, none of them adopting babies. In the family agenda, they further decry the impact of existing anti-discrimination policies, insisting that, quote, policy statements should never conflate sex with gender identity or sexual orientation. Rather, the secretary should proudly state that men and women are biological realities that are crucial to the advancement of life sciences and medical care, and that married men and women are the ideal and natural family structure because all children have a right to be raised by the men and women who conceived them. Listen, this is the only reasonable thing in there. That is reasonable to debate what is the best family structure. That's not crazy. A lot of people think that ideally children should be raised by a mom and a dad that made them together, that is like a traditional nuclear family. This is the only thing they've said that is even remotely like not crazy. I'm like, that's like Christian.
Well, okay,
like
but when does that not happen? When is that not the case? When is it like that's what happens unless there's abuse,
incest,
rape?
Yeah, right. Like, so what I'm saying is it's like I was like, you don't have to say that. Like everyone kind of knows that. Like that's why we all date and then want to get married and then want to have children. And that most of us that like have kids and aren't married first, like it wasn't planned that way. It's like, that's why most people don't go, I just want to have a baby. They go, I just want to fall in love. And then they fall in love and they go like, man,
how could I fess up?
They'd make such a great parent. Like there's a reason why that's the natural order for people. Like you don't have to say that out loud. I think everyone would have liked to have come from a place where they had both parents available and they were together, of course. But like this idea that like people are actively seeking to have non-traditional families is like, come the on. Like most people, like the whole thing about gay marriage was because gay people want to be normal. Like gay people wanted to get married because we wanted to emulate a traditional household with two parents and kids, and you're married and you're together. That's why people want it. That's why gay people want to adopt children, because they want to emulate a traditional family structure. Like it's very rare that a single person like seeks out to adopt a child, and it's hard for a single person to do that. Like, so this is the one thing they're saying that's kind of like middle, I'd say like mainstream, middle of the road. I think most people think this, and most people that aren't chronically online, like don't care about the trans thing. They understand that like this thing they're afraid of is just not happening. Like, it's just not happening. Like, no one's going into schools and teaching kids that like there are no biological sex differences between male bodies and female bodies. Like no one, that's not happening. That's like what's happening is that in sex ed, they now have a second unit that talks about trans identity. which is something that they're getting in like 7th grade or in high school. Like, and they already know because of the internet. So who cares? Like they've already been watching RuPaul's Drag Race.
This is where in the same section of this document, this is where they propose also ending funding for universal daycare and instead funding home-based childcare and educational curricula, quote, that equip mothers and caregivers, not parents, but specifically mothers, to connect with and improve their understanding of their infants, toddlers, and young children, which I love this in general. I hate that they only want to offer it to like specifically mothers, especially because in the document, they say a lot about how important fathers are, which is true. And it's important for fathers to actively choose to participate in parenting, which is probably the biggest reason why men don't have as much custody over kids, because they just don't want it. They don't ask for it. They just don't seek it. When they seek it, they tend to get it. But it bolsters their insistence that, yes, they said working fathers are essential to the well-being and development of children, which, yes, I mean, working parents are, but they specifically want fathers working, and they want women to be pregnant and unemployed and at home with their nuclear family. This is what they want for us. This is what they want us to be doing. This is how they envision us.
Their parents were together. Their parents are still together. Their parents are straight. And yes.
My parents started dating when they were teenagers. They remained married until the day my father died last year. My mom is still so in love with him. I could never imagine a world where she would ever even consider dipping a toe back in the dating pool, because that's how nuclear family in love for life. Dad was in the military, and I'm a satanic whore.
Yeah. Like, it's like, if it's so great, then how come we keep having queers?
Yeah, I'm a big old queer.
How do we keep having queers? I don't.
Yeah. Where did that come from? Weird.
All right, we did it.
In fact.
We did it. Are we doing part 2 next week? Is there a part 2?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a part 2.
Okay.
Well,
I'm down. I'm down to clown.
Do it next week.
Yeah.
I wanted to get the sort of like really like the shit that our audience is going to be big mad about out of the way, but there's a lot more. It's a goddamn near 1,000-page document, and it is chock full of insanity. It's a lot to parse. It's a lot.
It's just like the naked hatred of women is like what is so crazy to me. Is it's like, and white women eat the shit up. It's so weird. It's so
Have you seen the movement where women are going around with a like pad of Post-it notes in their purse, writing notes to women and leaving them in women's bathrooms saying like, hey, woman to woman, your husband can't know who you voted for, so vote for Kamala, because women don't know.
Michael Moore's big prediction is that Kamala's going to win in a landslide because women aren't admitting publicly that they're going to be voting for Kamala, but that they are.
Well, we'll get into this next week.
Yes.
But the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the NOAA, that does like hurricane tracking, weather tracking, earthquake, all of that, Project 2025 wants to really dismantle the out of them.
Oh.
They do not have much respect for that organization whatsoever, as we can see in times like this. But
I just want I wanted to play one thing, which is, this is a pastor talking about what Jesus said about religion in the Bible. Okay.
Jesus couldn't stand religion or religious people. Jesus said these shocking, challenging, and mind-blowing words in Matthew 23 and Luke 11. Jesus said, "Don't be like the hypocrites who make a show of themselves praying, nor the hypocrites who make a show of themselves fasting. You religious people, you are foolish. You're full of greed and wickedness. You keep your religious rules, but act unjustly. You sit proud in your religious buildings and wear your religious symbols in public, but inside you are dead, like walking graves. You cross the world to spread your religious message, and when people convert, you make them twice as much followers of hell as you are. You are blind fools. You have your religious rules, but utterly misunderstand God's will, and then fail to practice mercy, love, and goodness. You look beautiful on the outside and present yourselves as holy, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. You say you're sorry for those martyred in the past and claim that you would have protected them, but in fact, you continue to persecute the good of your own day and even have them murdered. And so you share the responsibility for all the blood that has ever been shed across history in the name of religion. You are snakes, a brood of vipers, and are creating hell and dragging others into it with you. You might be surprised, these are Jesus's.
Damn.
Anyway,
drop a link for that at the end of the script.
That's from the Bibes. So it's from the Bibes. And just keep that in mind next time someone asks you if you're a Christian or whatever, or a follower of Christ. You can be like, well, according to Matthew and Luke, following a religion is anti-Christian. You're not supposed to do that. That's not what he was teaching. He was teaching he was teaching his principles. So anyway, I love you. Support us, patreon.com/illrepute. We have a subreddit. It is Ill Repute Podcast. You can write to us at illreputepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on TikTok at Ill Repute Pod. You can find us on Instagram at We Are Ill Repute. You can find us on Twitter X at Ill Repute Pod. Please leave a review and a 5-star rating if you're so inclined. And if you haven't done so and you are comfortable doing it, text some of your friends and say, hey, I love this show. You should check it out.
Yeah.
And that's it for me.
That's it. Thank you so much, Savi. I love you.
I love you
You look
too.
stunning today, as always.
Thank you.
Mwah.
All right.
Hey.
Stop recording.